Have you ever stopped to wonder why the serpent plays such a significant role in the Garden of Eden? For generations, we've been taught that the serpent represents evil, the deceiver, the embodiment of sin that caused the fall of man. But what if everything we've been taught about the serpent is wrong? What if the true nature of the serpent is not what it appears to be? And what if this story holds deeper hidden truths? Truths that challenge everything we thought we knew about the origins of human consciousness. The serpent in Eden is one of the most iconic and mysterious figures in the Bible. It's a symbol that has been linked to temptation, sin, and the fall from grace. But if we take a step back and look at the serpent not as a force of evil, but as a symbol of something much deeper and more profound, we might find that its true role in the Garden of Eden has been obscured for centuries. Today we'll delve into the mystery behind this ancient symbol, revealing hidden meanings that go far beyond the surface-level interpretations that have dominated mainstream religious thought. You see, the serpent in the Garden of Eden isn't just an animal or a mere tempter. It's a symbolic representation of knowledge, transformation, and awakening. In ancient cultures across the world, serpents were revered as sacred creatures that held the secrets of the universe. They were associated with wisdom, healing, and the very forces of nature that govern the cosmos. And yet, when we look at the story of Eden, we see the serpent cast in a negative light, painted as the villain that leads humanity astray. But what if we told you that the serpent is not a villain, but rather a guide, a messenger of hidden wisdom that was never meant to be suppressed? What if, rather than leading humanity into sin, the serpent's actions represent the awakening of human consciousness, a moment of divine revelation that set the stage for the next phase of our spiritual evolution? This is the real mystery of the serpent in Eden. It is a story of enlightenment, of stepping into a higher realm of understanding, and of embracing the knowledge that has always been there, just out of reach. Throughout this video, we'll take you on a journey to explore the deeper esoteric meanings behind the serpent in the Garden of Eden. We'll uncover the serpent's true role in the biblical narrative, examining how it fits into the larger tapestry of human consciousness, ancient wisdom, and spiritual awakening. We'll explore the serpent's symbolism, not just in the Bible, but in other ancient cultures that viewed the serpent as a symbol of divine knowledge, healing, and transformation. As we dive deeper into the mystery, you'll begin to see how the serpent's role in Eden is much more than just the trigger for humanity's fall. It is, in fact, a catalyst for the awakening of the soul, a necessary step in the evolution of consciousness. This is not the story you've been taught, but the story that has been hidden for centuries, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. Are you ready to see the serpent in a new light? Are you prepared to challenge the conventional wisdom and uncover the deeper hidden truths of the Garden of Eden? Stay with us as we reveal the mystery of the serpent and the knowledge it brings to those who are willing to listen and understand. To truly understand the serpent's role in the Garden of Eden, we must first take a close look at the biblical narrative itself. In Genesis 3, the serpent is introduced as a cunning creature, one that tempts Eve to eat the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge. This act, according to traditional interpretations, results in humanity's fall from grace. The serpent's deceit in this view is the reason why sin and suffering entered the world, setting the stage for the separation of humankind from God. But is that the full picture? When we read Genesis 3 closely, we begin to notice some interesting details that challenge the conventional understanding. The serpent, as described in the text, is not just any ordinary creature. It is described as more cunning than any beast of the field. This implies that the serpent possesses a higher level of intelligence and awareness compared to the other creatures in the garden. Why would the serpent be portrayed as such a significant figure if it were simply the embodiment of evil? Additionally, there is the intriguing aspect of the serpent's interaction with Eve. The serpent does not directly command Eve to eat the fruit, but instead engages her in a dialogue questioning God's command. Did God really say, "You shall not eat from any tree in the garden"? The serpent asks, Genesis 3:1. 1. This question opens the door for Eve to contemplate God's command and to see it in a new light. It's almost as if the serpent is not forcing Eve into disobedience, but rather encouraging her to question the status quo and seek a deeper understanding of her reality. In fact, when we look more closely at the serpent's words, we see that it doesn't necessarily lie to Eve. Instead, the serpent subtly reveals a deeper truth. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Genesis 3:5. This statement, rather than being a deceitful ploy, hints at the possibility that humanity's ultimate potential lies in the knowledge that God has forbidden them from acquiring. The serpent, in essence, invites Eve to embrace her own potential for divine knowledge and self-awareness. What if the serpent in this context is not a villain, but a liberator? What if its role in the story is not to corrupt Eve, but to awaken her to the greater truths of existence? The serpent's words suggest a path of transformation, one that leads to greater understanding and enlightenment. It encourages Eve to move beyond the limitations of her current state and to access a higher level of wisdom. This idea of the serpent as a symbol of enlightenment aligns with the interpretations found in many ancient traditions. Throughout history, the serpent has been seen as a symbol of wisdom, knowledge, and spiritual awakening. In ancient Egypt, for example, the uraeus, a stylized cobra, was associated with the goddess Wadjet, who was often depicted as a protector and a source of divine wisdom. The serpent in this context was not evil, but was a powerful force of protection and enlightenment. Similarly, in many other cultures, serpents were revered as symbols of healing and transformation. In Greek mythology, the god Asclepius, associated with healing, carried a staff with a serpent coiled around it, a symbol that is still used in modern medicine today. In the Hindu tradition, the serpent is closely tied to the concept of Kundalini, the dormant spiritual energy that, when awakened, leads to enlightenment and union with the divine. Given these ancient associations, it becomes clear that the serpent in Eden may have a much more complex role than what is traditionally ascribed to it. Rather than being the antagonist in the biblical narrative, the serpent may represent a force that pushes humanity towards self-realization and spiritual awakening. It challenges Eve, and through her all of humanity, to step outside the boundaries of ignorance and embrace the potential for divine knowledge and transformation. By framing the serpent as a symbol of enlightenment, we are invited to reconsider the meaning of the fall itself. What if the fall from Eden was not a punishment, but a necessary step in humanity's evolution. What if the act of eating the forbidden fruit symbolized humanity's first taste of true knowledge, an awakening that allowed us to become self-aware, to understand the dualities of good and evil, and to ultimately take our place as co-creators in the divine plan? As we continue exploring this mystery, we will dive deeper into the symbolism of the serpent in the broader context of ancient wisdom, traditions, shedding light on the serpent's true role in the Garden of Eden and its ongoing significance in spiritual awakening. As we begin to step beyond the biblical narrative, we can explore the serpent's rich and complex symbolism in various ancient cultures, where it was not seen as a malevolent figure, but rather as a divine or transformative force. The serpent across many traditions was associated with wisdom, rebirth, and even the divine. Understanding this broader cultural context helps us unravel the deeper meanings behind the serpent in Eden. In ancient Egypt, the serpent was a central symbol of power and protection. The uraeus, a stylized cobra, was a sacred emblem worn by pharaohs and gods, alike symbolizing the goddess Wadjet, who represented divine sovereignty and protection. The uraeus was often depicted as a coiled serpent, poised to strike, signifying the godly authority of the ruler. This serpent was not a symbol of corruption or sin, but of divine knowledge and strength. The pharaohs, as divine rulers, were seen as embodying this serpentine power, linking them to the divine wisdom of the gods. Moreover, in Egyptian mythology, serpents were also associated with the life cycle, particularly through the symbol of the Ouroboros, a serpent eating its own tail. The Ouroboros represents the eternal cycle of life-death and rebirth, an unbroken circle that is both self-sustaining and eternally renewing. It is a powerful symbol of transformation, suggesting that the serpent is an agent of regeneration, not destruction. The concept of cyclical time linked to the serpent hints at a deeper understanding of reality, where all things are interconnected and constantly evolving. This association with transformation and eternal life can also be found in other ancient civilizations. In Mesoamerican cultures, for instance, the feathered serpent was a prominent figure. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent deity of the Aztecs and other Mesoamerican civilizations, was a god of wisdom, life, and the dawn. He represented both the serpent, a symbol of the earth and renewal, and the bird, a symbol of the heavens and spirituality. This duality signified the balance between the material and the spiritual, reminding us that true wisdom involves navigating both worlds. Quetzalcoatl was also credited with creating humanity, further solidifying the serpent's role as a creator and a symbol of knowledge. The ancient Greeks too revered the serpent as a symbol of healing and wisdom. The god Asclepius, the Greek god of medicine, was often depicted holding a staff with a serpent coiled around it, a symbol that still survives today in the medical profession. The serpent was believed to have healing powers capable of bringing both life and death, symbolizing the delicate balance between these forces. This connection to healing and wisdom aligns with the serpent's role in ancient cultures as a force of enlightenment and renewal, rather than a source of destruction or evil. Even in the Hindu tradition, the serpent holds a deeply sacred place. In Hinduism, the concept of Kundalini represents a dormant spiritual energy that resides within every human being, often symbolized by a coiled serpent at the base of the spine. The awakening of the Kundalini is a key part of the spiritual journey, where the serpent uncoils and ascends through the chakras, leading to enlightenment and union with the divine. This concept emphasizes that the serpent is a symbol of inner transformation, awakening and spiritual growth, rather than temptation and fall. When we view the serpent through the lens of these ancient traditions, it becomes evident that the serpent was not universally seen as an evil force. Instead, it was regarded as a powerful symbol of knowledge, renewal, and spiritual awakening. Across various cultures, serpents were associated with the divine, with wisdom, and with the transformative process of life itself. They were seen as guardians of knowledge, protectors of sacred secrets, and agents of both destruction and creation. So why then, in the biblical narrative, did the serpent take on such a negative role? The answer may lie in the historical and theological context of the time when Genesis was written. Many scholars believe that the biblical story of Eden was written in response to the religious and cultural practices of surrounding peoples, including the Egyptians, the Sumerians, and the Mesopotamians, who all revered the serpent in some form. By casting the serpent in a negative light, the biblical authors may have been distancing their narrative from the serpent's positive associations in these cultures, establishing a clear distinction between the monotheistic God of Israel and the polytheistic deities of surrounding civilizations. This shift in the serpent's symbolism reflects a larger theological shift that sought to centralize the God of Israel as the sole authority with other gods and symbols, including the serpent relegated to the status of false idols. But as we've seen in the ancient cultures we've explored, the serpent's original symbolism was far more complex and nuanced, representing knowledge, wisdom, and transformation values that were far from evil. In the next part of this video, we will explore how the Gnostic tradition, which emerged alongside early Christianity, offers a radically different interpretation of the serpent, viewing it not as a tempter, but as a bringer of enlightenment. Stay tuned as we continue to peel back the layers of this ancient mystery. As we continue our exploration into the serpent's true nature, we turn our attention to the Gnostic tradition, which offers a radically different interpretation of the serpent's role in the Garden of Eden. Gnosticism, an early religious movement that emerged alongside Christianity, was centered on the pursuit of hidden knowledge, gnosis, that was thought to lead to spiritual enlightenment and union with the divine. The Gnostics viewed the serpent in a much more positive light than mainstream Christianity, seeing it not as an agent of sin, but as a guide to the deeper spiritual truths of the universe. In the Gnostic texts, the serpent is often portrayed as a symbol of divine wisdom and enlightenment. In the Apocryphon of John, a Gnostic gospel, the serpent is described as a being sent by the divine to help humanity achieve spiritual awakening. According to this text, the serpent's act of tempting Eve was not an act of rebellion, but rather an act of grace intended to free humanity from the limitations imposed by the demiurge, the false god who created the material world. The Gnostics believed that the material world was an illusion created by the demiurge to trap human souls in ignorance. The serpent in this view represents the force that awakens humanity to the truth, encouraging Eve, and by extension, all of humanity to break free from the prison of the material world and attain the divine knowledge that leads to spiritual liberation. The serpent's role as a liberator is further emphasized in the Gospel of Eve, another Gnostic text, where the serpent is depicted as the one who opens Eve's eyes to the hidden knowledge of the divine. In this narrative, the serpent is not a tempter who leads Eve to sin, but a teacher who reveals to her the truth about God's creation and the nature of the world. The serpent's gift to Eve is the knowledge that allows her to transcend the limitations of the material world and reach for something higher, something divine. This knowledge, according to the Gnostics, is what enables the soul to escape the cycle of reincarnation and return to the divine source from which it came. The Gnostic interpretation of the serpent challenges the traditional Christian view, which paints the serpent as a symbol of evil. Instead of being the agent of humanity's fall, the serpent is seen as the one who helps humanity rise. The Gnostics understood the serpent as a symbol of wisdom, wisdom that was often hidden from the masses, reserved for those who were willing to seek it out and transcend the illusions of the physical world. In this sense, the serpent is a symbol of enlightenment, of the awakening that comes when one gains access to secret divine knowledge. This positive view of the serpent as a bringer of wisdom can also be found in other Gnostic writings, where the serpent is associated with the divine Sophia, the goddess of wisdom. Sophia in Gnostic mythology is often depicted as a serpent, representing the knowledge that transcends the material world and connects the soul to the divine. Sophia is the one who imparts the wisdom necessary for spiritual awakening, and the serpent is her earthly manifestation, symbolizing the knowledge that frees the soul from the confines of ignorance. The Gnostic perspective on the serpent challenges the conventional interpretation that has dominated Christian thought for centuries. Rather than being a force of evil, the serpent is portrayed as a force of enlightenment and liberation, a force that encourages humanity to awaken from the illusions of the material world and embrace the higher spiritual truth that lie beyond. This view of the serpent as a symbol of wisdom and liberation aligns with the serpent's role in many ancient traditions, where it was seen as a guardian of divine knowledge and a guide to spiritual awakening. It is important to note that Gnosticism was considered heretical by the early Christian Church, which sought to suppress many of the Gnostic texts that offered alternative interpretations of biblical stories. The Gnostic view of the serpent, along with their understanding of divine knowledge and the nature of the material world, was at odds with the emerging Orthodox Christian doctrine, which emphasized the idea of original sin and the need for redemption through Jesus Christ. The suppression of Gnostic teachings was part of a larger effort to establish a uniform Christian orthodoxy, one that would exclude the more mystical and esoteric interpretations of the Bible. However, the Gnostic view of the serpent has persisted throughout history, influencing various spiritual and philosophical movements that emphasize the pursuit of hidden knowledge and personal enlightenment. Many modern esoteric traditions, including Hermeticism, Kabbalah, and the New Age movement, draw heavily on Gnostic concepts and the idea that true wisdom lies hidden beneath the surface of conventional religious teachings. As we continue to explore the serpent's symbolism, we see that it is not a figure of evil, but a symbol of divine wisdom, spiritual awakening, and the quest for higher knowledge. The Gnostic interpretation of the serpent reveals a deeper, more profound role for this ancient symbol, one that has been hidden from mainstream religious thought for centuries. In the next part, we will dive into the serpent's connection to Kundalini and spiritual energy, exploring how the serpent symbolizes the awakening of the dormant spiritual power within us all. As we continue to uncover the hidden truths behind the serpent, we now turn our attention to the spiritual dimensions of its symbolism, particularly its connection to the concept of Kundalini. In many ancient traditions, the serpent is not just a symbol of wisdom or knowledge, but also represents the dormant spiritual energy within every human being. This energy, known as Kundalini in the Eastern traditions, is often depicted as a coiled serpent at the base of the spine, waiting to be awakened and to ascend through the chakras, leading to enlightenment and spiritual awakening. The concept of Kundalini is deeply rooted in Hinduism, where it is believed that every person is born with this dormant spiritual energy within them. Kundalini is often symbolized by a serpent coiled at the base of the spine, representing potential energy that is hidden within the individual. The awakening of this energy is seen as a transformative process that leads the individual to higher levels of consciousness, spiritual liberation, and unity with the divine. This connection between the serpent and spiritual awakening is not exclusive to Hinduism. In many other ancient traditions, the serpent has been associated with the concept of spiritual energy and transformation. In Greek mythology, for instance, the god Asclepius, who was associated with healing, was often depicted holding a staff with a serpent coiled around it. The serpent in this context symbolized healing, energy, transformation, and the life force that flows through all living things. The serpent's ability to shed its skin also represents renewal and regeneration, an essential theme in many spiritual traditions that emphasize the idea of personal transformation. The serpent as a symbol of spiritual energy is also found in the Western esoteric traditions, particularly in Hermeticism and alchemy. In these traditions, the serpent represents the spiritual forces that drive the process of inner transformation, where the individual works to awaken and harness these energies to achieve spiritual enlightenment and self-realization. This aligns with the concept of the serpent in the Garden of Eden, where the serpent's act of awakening Eve can be seen as a symbolic representation of the awakening of spiritual consciousness. In the context of the Bible, the serpent's interaction with Eve can be viewed as a metaphor for the awakening of Kundalini energy. The act of Eve eating the fruit from the tree of knowledge is not just about disobedience or the acquisition of forbidden knowledge. It is also about the activation of a latent energy within her, a spiritual awakening that sets her on a path of transformation. By eating the fruit, Eve awakens her inner potential, just as the serpent in Kundalini traditions awakens the dormant spiritual energy within the individual. This awakening process, however, is not without its challenges. Just as the serpent's ascension through the chakras in Hinduism can be a difficult and intense experience, so too is the journey of spiritual awakening depicted in the biblical narrative. In the case of Eve, her awakening leads to the knowledge of good and evil, the realization of her own mortality, and the eventual exile from Eden. But rather than viewing this as a punishment, we can interpret it as a necessary step in the spiritual evolution of humanity. The knowledge Eve gains is not just intellectual, it is deeply spiritual, leading to a heightened awareness of the self and the world around her. The serpent's role in the awakening of Eve is thus more complex than simply being a tempter. It represents the force of spiritual energy that propels the soul toward greater understanding and higher consciousness. The serpent in Eden serves as a catalyst for transformation, guiding Eve through the process of awakening and the resulting knowledge that leads to a new phase of existence. In this light, the serpent is not an enemy of humanity, but rather an ally in the journey toward spiritual evolution. The connection between the serpent and spiritual energy can also be seen in other cultures and spiritual practices. In Chinese philosophy, the serpent is often associated with the Taoist concept of qi, or life force energy, which flows through the body and the universe. In the mystical traditions of the West, the serpent has been seen as a symbol of the transformative power of the divine, capable of guiding the soul toward enlightenment and union with the divine source. This universal symbolism of the serpent as a guide to higher consciousness transcends cultural boundaries and connects ancient spiritual traditions across the globe. As we continue our exploration of the serpent's symbolism, it becomes clear that its role in spiritual traditions is far more profound than many realize. The serpent is not just a symbol of temptation or sin. It is a symbol of transformation, spiritual energy, and the awakening of the divine potential within all of us. In the next part of this video, we will examine the serpent's role in Christian mysticism, where it is seen not as a force of evil, but as a symbol of divine wisdom and spiritual illumination. In the previous sections, we've explored the serpent's symbolism in various ancient traditions, where it is viewed as a force of wisdom, transformation, and spiritual awakening. However, when we turn to Christian mysticism, the serpent takes on a different, yet still profound role. While mainstream Christianity has traditionally associated the serpent with temptation and sin, Christian mystics and esoteric traditions often see the serpent as a symbol of divine wisdom, spiritual insight, and transformation. One of the most significant aspects of Christian mysticism is its focus on the inner mystical journey of the soul, its quest for union with the divine. In this context, the serpent represents the spiritual energy that guides the soul through its transformation. Rather than being a force of evil, the serpent in Christian mysticism is seen as an agent of divine illumination, one that leads the initiate toward greater understanding and deeper connection with God. The key to understanding the serpent in Christian mysticism lies in the concept of knowledge. Throughout Christian mysticism, knowledge is not simply intellectual understanding, but a form of deep intuitive knowing that transcends the limitations of the material world. This type of knowledge is seen as a gift from God, and it is through this divine knowledge that the soul can be awakened and transformed. The serpent, in this sense, is a symbol of that knowledge that is not given freely, but must be sought after through spiritual practice, contemplation, and inner revelation. In the Gospel of John, Jesus speaks of the serpent lifted up in the wilderness, John 3:14, referring to the Old Testament story of Moses lifting up the bronze serpent on a pole to heal the Israelites who were bitten by poisonous snakes, Numbers 21:4-9. This passage is significant because it reinterprets the serpent in a positive light, linking it to the idea of healing and spiritual renewal. For Christian mystics, the serpent lifted up is a symbol of Christ's own crucifixion, where he was lifted up on the cross to bring healing to the soul of humanity. In this context, the serpent represents not sin or temptation, but the transformative power of God's grace and the healing of the soul through divine knowledge. Christian mysticism also draws upon the symbolism of the serpent in the story of Adam and Eve. In traditional Christian doctrine, the serpent in Eden is seen as the instigator of humanity's fall from grace, but mystics often interpret this event differently. Rather than seeing the serpent as a tempter who causes Eve to fall into sin, Christian mystics often see the serpent as a symbol of the knowledge that was necessary for humanity's spiritual awakening. In this view, the serpent's act of offering the forbidden fruit to Eve represents a gift of divine knowledge that allowed humanity to awaken to the deeper truths of existence and to take its first step toward spiritual maturity. This interpretation is aligned with the mystical concept of gnosis, a term used to describe a direct experiential knowledge of God. For Christian mystics, gnosis is not something that can be obtained through external rituals or dogmas, but is instead an interpersonal experience of divine truth. The serpent, as a symbol of this hidden knowledge, serves as a guide that leads the soul to direct communion with God beyond the confines of conventional religious practices. Furthermore, in the mystical traditions of the Church Fathers, there is a recurring theme of the serpent being associated with wisdom. Early Christian thinkers such as Origen and Gregory of Nyssa saw the serpent as a symbol of divine wisdom, albeit one that was misunderstood by those who viewed the serpent as a force of evil. According to these mystics, the serpent's role in Eden was not to lead humanity into sin, but to offer humanity the opportunity to transcend its ignorance and embrace a deeper understanding of the divine plan. This view echoes the Gnostic perspective, where the serpent is seen as a guide to spiritual enlightenment and awakening. Additionally, the serpent's ability to shed its skin is often interpreted as a symbol of regeneration and renewal in Christian mysticism. Just as the serpent sheds its old skin to reveal a new, fresh layer, the soul, through divine knowledge and spiritual practice, sheds its old sinful nature and is reborn in the image of Christ. This process of spiritual renewal is central to Christian mysticism, where the journey of the soul is one of constant transformation, shedding the ego and worldly attachments in order to align more closely with the divine will. In Christian alchemy and other mystical traditions, the serpent's coiled form is also seen as a symbol of the energy that lies dormant within the human soul, waiting to be awakened through spiritual practice. This echoes the concept of Kundalini, where the serpent energy rises through the chakras, leading the individual toward enlightenment and spiritual union with the divine. In this way, the serpent in Christian mysticism can be seen as a symbol of the soul's potential to awaken to its divine purpose and to ascend toward spiritual perfection. Ultimately, the serpent's role in Christian mysticism is far more complex and multifaceted than traditional interpretations would suggest. Rather than being a figure of evil or temptation, the serpent represents a force of transformation, divine wisdom, and spiritual awakening. Through the serpent, the soul is invited to seek deeper knowledge to awaken to its true divine nature and to undergo a process of regeneration and spiritual rebirth. As we move forward in this exploration, we will delve deeper into the ways in which the serpent symbolizes spiritual energy and inner transformation. In the next part, we will explore the serpent's connection to the concept of rebirth and how it plays a central role in the initiation process that leads to higher states of consciousness and enlightenment. As we continue to unravel the mystery of the serpent, we now turn our attention to one of its most profound and universal symbols, that of rebirth. The serpent's association with renewal, transformation, and spiritual regeneration is found in numerous spiritual and philosophical traditions, from the shedding of its skin to its connection with cycles of life, death, and rebirth. The serpent serves as an ancient symbol of the eternal process of spiritual renewal. One of the most striking characteristics of the serpent is its ability to shed its skin, a process that symbolizes regeneration and renewal. In nature, this act of shedding the old skin allows the serpent to grow and evolve, leaving behind its former self in favor of a new, more refined form. This image of shedding the old to embrace the new resonates deeply with spiritual and mystical traditions that emphasize the process of personal transformation. In many ancient cultures, the shedding of the serpent's skin was viewed as a metaphor for spiritual rebirth. In the Egyptian tradition, for example, the snake represented the cycle of life and death. The serpent in this context symbolized the death of the old self and the emergence of a new enlightened self, just as the serpent itself was reborn in a new skin. This symbolism aligns with the concept of initiation, where the initiate undergoes a spiritual death and rebirth, shedding their old identity to become a new, more spiritually awakened being. In Christian mysticism, this process of spiritual renewal is often likened to the rebirth that comes through Christ. Just as the serpent sheds its skin, the Christian mystic believes that the soul must shed its sinful nature in order to become more like Christ. This concept is deeply rooted in the idea of spiritual regeneration, a theme that runs throughout the New Testament. In John 3:3, Jesus tells Nicodemus, "Very truly, I tell you, no one can see the kingdom of God unless they are born again." This idea of being born again is central to Christian mysticism and represents the spiritual rebirth that comes through embracing divine knowledge, grace, and transformation. The serpent's association with rebirth is also closely tied to the idea of the circularity of life. In many cultures, the serpent's coiled form is seen as a symbol of the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. This cyclical nature of existence is reflected in the concept of the Ouroboros, a serpent that eats its own tail, symbolizing the infinite nature of the universe and the continuous process of creation and destruction. The Ouroboros represents the idea that life is a never-ending cycle, where death is not an end, but a transformation, a necessary part of the spiritual journey. This understanding of life as a cycle of continual transformation is also reflected in the concept of reincarnation found in Hinduism and Buddhism. In these traditions, the serpent is often associated with the idea of spiritual evolution, where the soul undergoes multiple lifetimes of growth and refinement. Each cycle of rebirth brings the soul closer to enlightenment and liberation, shedding its attachments to the material world and ascending toward higher levels of consciousness. In this context, the serpent represents the soul's journey through the cycles of birth, death, and rebirth, each time shedding its old self to embrace a more enlightened and purified form. In the Western esoteric tradition, the serpent's association with rebirth is also linked to the idea of initiation, a process of spiritual awakening and transformation. Initiates in ancient mystery schools often underwent rituals that symbolized death and rebirth, marking their transition from ignorance to enlightenment. The serpent, as a symbol of wisdom and transformation, played a central role in these initiation rites. Just as the serpent sheds its skin to reveal a new self, the initiate shed their old self to become a more enlightened being, ready to embrace the hidden mysteries of the universe. In alchemy, the serpent is often used as a symbol of the philosopher's stone, the ultimate goal of alchemical transformation. The philosopher's stone represents the process of spiritual transmutation, where the base aspects of the self are purified and transformed into divine wisdom. The serpent, as a symbol of this transmutation, represents the power to transform the soul, turning base impure elements into higher, more refined, spiritual energy. The serpent's role in spiritual rebirth also echoes the concept of awakening found in many mystical traditions. In the context of the Garden of Eden, the serpent's role can be viewed as the initiator of Eve's awakening, as she becomes aware of the knowledge of good and evil, thus taking the first step towards spiritual enlightenment. The act of eating the forbidden fruit in this view symbolizes the awakening of human consciousness, a necessary step in the evolution of the soul. This awakening, however, is not without its challenges. Just as the serpent's shedding of its skin can be a painful and difficult process, so too is the journey of spiritual awakening. The path of spiritual transformation requires the shedding of old beliefs, attachments, and egoic tendencies, often a difficult and uncomfortable process. Yet this pain and discomfort are part of the necessary journey towards spiritual enlightenment and rebirth. In the next section, we will explore how the serpent's symbolism of rebirth and transformation aligns with the idea of spiritual ascension. We will look at how the serpent's role in awakening the consciousness relates to the larger process of transcending the limitations of the physical world and reaching for higher spiritual truths. Stay with us as we continue to uncover the mysteries of the serpent's role in the evolution of the soul. As we draw this exploration of the serpent to a close, we are left with a deeper understanding of this ancient symbol and its profound role in spiritual transformation. From the Garden of Eden to the wisdom traditions of the East and the mystical schools of the West, the serpent has served as a symbol of knowledge, spiritual awakening, and rebirth. What we've learned is that the serpent is not the villain that many have believed it to be, but rather a guide, a teacher, and a catalyst for the soul's evolution. The serpent's true role is not one of destruction, but of awakening. It is the force that challenges us to move beyond the illusions of the material world and seek a higher level of consciousness. Just as the serpent sheds its skin to reveal a new self, so too must we shed our old limiting beliefs and attachments to uncover the divine potential within us. The serpent, therefore, represents the power of transformation, the process of death and rebirth that leads us towards spiritual enlightenment. In the Garden of Eden, the serpent's invitation to Eve to eat the forbidden fruit was not an act of temptation, but an invitation to awaken to a greater truth. The knowledge that Eve gained was not a curse, but a blessing, a gift that allowed her to see the world through a new lens, one that was filled with deeper understanding and spiritual insight. The serpent in this context can be seen as a symbol of divine wisdom, offering humanity the chance to transcend ignorance and embrace the knowledge that leads to liberation. This view of the serpent aligns with the teachings of many ancient traditions, where the serpent is revered as a symbol of divine wisdom and the transformative power of spiritual awakening. In Hinduism, the serpent represents the Kundalini energy, the dormant spiritual force within every individual waiting to be awakened and to lead the soul to enlightenment. In the Western esoteric tradition, the serpent is associated with the process of alchemical transmutation, where the base aspects of the self are purified and transformed into divine wisdom. And in Gnosticism, the serpent is seen as the bringer of hidden knowledge, guiding humanity towards spiritual enlightenment and liberation. By reinterpreting the serpent's role in these ancient texts and traditions, we gain a more profound understanding of our own spiritual journey. The serpent is not an external force that leads us astray. It is an internal force that pushes us to awaken, to evolve, and to reach for higher truths. It challenges us to move beyond our conditioned perceptions of good and evil, and to embrace the wisdom that lies hidden within the depths of our being. As we reflect on the serpent's true symbolism, we are reminded that the path to spiritual enlightenment is not easy. It requires courage, introspection, and the willingness to confront our own limitations. But it is through this journey of transformation, this shedding of the old self, that we come to realize our true potential. The serpent as a symbol of rebirth reminds us that every ending is also a new beginning. Each stage of our spiritual growth is an opportunity to shed the old and embrace the new, to grow and evolve into the highest version of ourselves. So what does the serpent in Eden truly represent? It represents the awakening of consciousness, the realization of our divine potential, and the transformative power of knowledge. The serpent is not a force of evil, but a symbol of wisdom, enlightenment, and the path to spiritual liberation. It is a guide that leads us on our journey of self-discovery, urging us to shed our old limiting beliefs and embrace the higher truth that lies beyond. As you reflect on the serpent's true role, ask yourself, how can you begin to shed your old skins? What parts of your own life and consciousness are ready for transformation? The serpent's wisdom is available to all who are ready to awaken and embrace the journey of spiritual rebirth. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the mystery of the serpent in Eden. As we continue to explore the hidden truths of the Bible and spiritual wisdom, remember that the path of transformation is always available to those who seek it. Stay tuned for more insights as we delve deeper into the mysteries that have been hidden for centuries, waiting to be revealed. If this exploration has sparked new questions or insights, we encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries of the Bible and the ancient wisdom that has shaped our world. Until next time, may the serpent's wisdom guide you on your own path of awakening.